Hey guys, so look, today's episode is really going to be one for the books. We have our special guest today, Laurel. We brought her back. She's going to be with us monthly, so we want to give her a hand for the time that she is taking out to be with us. Today, we're going to be talking about trauma bonds. Today's topic is very sensitive, and so I want to let you know it is sensitive because some of you are actually in this type of relationship. And so I pray that it helps you. I pray that it opens your eyes. I pray that you get the strength and the courage to leave. I also pray and I pray that you don't just listen to this for yourself, but you share this. So do me a favor, take the time now and share this with someone. Share this with another sister. I also have a favor that I need you guys to help me out with. I want you guys to rate us. If you can, rate us, whatever platform you are listening to us on. Please take the time to rate us, and possibly, if you have the time, write a review for us. This is going to help us with our ratings. This is going to help us gauge where we are going to be going in the near future. And so, if you would take the time and just do that for me. Also, do me another favor. If you haven't already, can you subscribe? If you are not familiar with us on YouTube, you can find us on YouTube. We are in video format there. And so if you can possibly go to YouTube and find us, the Healing Place Podcast. And I want you to do me a favor and subscribe there. We are doing our best to get our ratings up. We're doing our best to get the word out there that we are out there. We're going to be going through a couple of changes in the near future, but we don't want to lose any listeners due to those changes. And so we're asking everybody to write a review, rate us, and find us on the YouTube and hit the subscribe button. Also, and to just share. Let us know what you feel about the show. Also, today's episode, we're asking you if you have questions that pop up and you would like for them to be answered on the show. You can do it anonymous. We will not mention your name. Please write in your question to Brianna276 at gmail.com and just put in the topic or subject line question for podcast. And we will take your question and we will answer them live online next month. Hey, it's us again on the Healing Place podcast. I'm excited. We have our guest again, Laurel. Um, and I'm excited because today we're going to be talking about a topic that I think a lot of women, I know men can deal with it too, but I know women deal with it more so than men, that I can see anyway. You might have more statistics on it than I do, but I know for me and my profession, or in my on my side of the world, let's say that I get more women than I do men. And so I wanted us to dive into and talk about the topic of trauma bonding.
Okay.
Trauma bonding. And what, so I'm gonna let you open up and we're gonna take it from there. Thank you for joining us again though. I'm excited because I think this is going to really bring about a lot of healing for our audience. So
Okay.
let's go ahead and dive into it.
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks. I'm glad to be here. And trauma bonding, I think it's an important conversation to have. I also think it's an important, we should define it a little bit, because like everything, the buzzwords get going and then they kind of take on a life of their own. And so just to actually like define trauma bonding, it's kind of like when we are faced with abuse and neglect in childhood, let's say, we are chemically wired to focus on getting um, getting to the other side, so to speak. So when the abuser is the person that brings us relief, the brain associates them with safety. So if my mom hits me, but then feels really, really sorry later and says, I love you and I'll never do that again. As a child, I'm learning trauma bonding just in that the brain latches onto the positive experience of relief rather than the negative impact of the abuse.
Okay, well let's stop right there for a minute, because we have parents that are listening now and they're raising their children. So I wonder how many of us as parents have done that. Okay, I'm
Mhm,
gonna spank. Your child has done something really bad. You spank them, but you're a parent that really doesn't like to discipline like that. But then once you do, you go back and you're like, I'm sorry.
mhm. Yeah,
How
yeah.
So are we having are we teaching our children that even at that stage?
Yeah, in a sense, yeah, we're because what we're not doing as parents is stopping ourselves before we commit the hurt, the
Mm-hmm.
emotional hurt or the physical hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are teaching our child to, okay, and I've even heard it with my own kids, like, it's all right, mom's just mad right now. Like she'll come and apologize later. And it's like, oh no, that's not what we want. Like we
Mm-hmm.
don't you know this happens because the body's threat response, the nervous system, the fight flight freeze, turns off the part of the brain that can think long term when we're in crisis. So when we're in crisis, the part of our brain that can see beyond shuts down. So even when parents are freaking out, they're in their own little crisis in that moment. So they can't even necessarily see beyond, like, I'm going to regret this. Let's not do this right now. My child didn't really do anything. There is actually no real emergency.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so when we can't see long term because we're in crisis, this creates the feeling that we need to just like react however we're feeling, and
Mm-hmm.
we don't see the collateral damage of our behavior or our words, or yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if then you're the child and you're in this like dynamic with one of your parents, or you're an adult and you're in a dynamic with a partner, this creates the feeling that we need the abuser to survive. And it's often mistaken for love, and it's not consciously mistaken for love. We have to remember we're working like biologically.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, if my husband hits me, or if my husband, calls me mean names and then comes back and apologizes, well, that's when I feel the real love. That's when I feel the kind of love we first had. So, right? So, yeah, lots of pieces to it.
Mm-hmm. I think this is going to be really good because, I see so many, and of course, I'm going to let you talk and get deeper into it because I see so many women that have those tendencies or they're in that type of relationship. And
Hmm.
when the hurt occurs, it's the time between, you know, before the apologizing happens,
Hmm.
that they're spiraling downhill.
Yeah.
And then they're like, okay, I got to get out of this. I got to get it. And then when the abuser comes back, and apologizes, it's like it'll be all right, it'll be all right.
Hmm.
And like you
Yeah.
said, with our children, they're mom or dad, they'll come or we apologize, and it's like everything is all right. And when it is a very unhealthy relationship or
Yeah.
really real
Yeah.
abuse, the
Real. Yeah.
children don't know how to go and really tell because they feel like if they do, um, be betraying their parent.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So, in that sense, um, trauma bonding, we could say it's like a hormonal attachment, and it's created by repeated abuse,
Hmm.
sprinkled with this experience of being saved every now and again. And the being saved is, oh, yeah, but see how sweet he is to me now. Or like, yeah, but mom feels so bad and she took me shopping. That feeling of like, I'm saved
Hmm.
is, and so a slightly different version of this cycle can be seen like when we are, this is kind of a random one, but take like at a slot machine in Vegas, and it's called like intermittent reinforcement. And casinos have like long used this data surrounding it to help us like pour, hundreds
Hmm.
of thousands of our dollars
Hmm.
into their hands in the hope that like we finally get that feeling of winning.
Yeah.
So it's like saved, or that feeling of winning or being seen or being acknowledged. It's like that's so programmed into us because that to us feels like we're living, we're in contact, we're in connection with the
Hmm.
people that are there that signed up to love us.
Yeah.
And so we will hold on in some really dire situations just to feel that again.
Mhm. And I think that's sad because I want to say when I was sitting down and I was thinking about this, I was thinking about I think there's more people who have experienced this than we really know,
Hmm. Hmm.
you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's become a little bit part of our, like, modern ways of interacting. Like, just because you say you're sorry, you're going to say you're sorry doesn't mean you get to act like a fill in the blank. Like,
Mhm,
you don't, even out in the general public, like, okay, like, just because you're going to like turn around and be like sorry doesn't mean you get to push past me on the street. Like,
right.
the sorry is not a reason for the doing. It's
Mhm,
not an excuse, right? But there's something where I think all of us have sort of taken this on in a way. It's like we send the text and then it's like, I'm so sorry. And it's like, wait, but what, we're missing the whole point. The whole point
mhm,
is not that we say sorry. The point is we did it to begin with and we didn't stop ourselves. We didn't
mhm,
have any long range vision in that
mhm,
moment. We're purely impulsive. We did
mhm,
not exercise the choice or right action. We
mhm.
let it all go and we followed it up with some fluffy thing to try to make it feel all better.
This is so good because as you're talking, what I'm thinking about is, religion.
Hmm.
Religion teaches that, you should forgive. You should, the person apologizes, and you should be able to move on. But the piece that people don't like to really teach on is that reconciliation part. Because you might say you're sorry, you might apologize, and I accept it, but I don't have to accept you back into my life. I don't have to reconcile some type of relationship with you because you are still the same person.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So that's where we will always accept the same person back into our life unless we're bringing consciousness and awareness into what they're doing to us, into the impact, into how we are participating. A young child can't do that though. But when we grow up and we are doing that with our children or repeating patterns with our children that were done to us, or we find ourselves in relationship, or we're constantly finding ourselves in a place of like, I'm always accepting the apology, or it's like we have a choice in those moments to say actually forgiveness is actually for ourselves.
Mhm,
It's not for that other person, right?
mhm,
So if I did something really terrible to a friend and I say I'm sorry, she really gets to say, well, that's fine, but it's unforgivable for me.
mhm,
And I don't your forgiveness is your thing, but for me, I need to say no thank you anymore.
mhm, mhm,
Yeah,
and
that's trauma work, so because we have to like train the nervous system to not keep going back into those dynamics.
mhm, and it takes a lot of work for one who has, the trauma started from a young person, from a
Yeah,
child, and then they have grown up with this. It
yeah.
takes a lot of work for them to, unwire the brain in that way. I know I don't take on a lot of, people who have dealt with trauma
Mhm,
from childhood unless they're really, really ready to do the work, because a lot of times people say they're ready, but they're not really ready, because when you start addressing those issues of where it stemmed from, they don't want to look at the person or their parent and say
mhm,
they were the problem.
mhm.
That's
Yeah.
I think that's the hardest, to look at your parent and say you were the problem. It
Mhm.
started here. Even though you could only give me or raise me at the capacity that you had, it
Yeah,
still was an issue because I'm
yeah,
dealing with it now.
that's right. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and I think one thing, it's like it's one thing to know things intellectually. Like I know intellectually that my patterns are rooted like deep into my childhood,
Mhm,
but knowing better, even from the one who's abusing or taking advantage of, or the one who's continuously taking that,
mhm,
the knowing better never really like relieves us of it. It doesn't break us free from it. It's not an instant like someone hands you the jail cell keys and you're out. It's like it sort of can sometimes feel like as helpful as knowing that pizza isn't good for us, but we order it anyway because it tastes so good. It's
mhm,
just it's that experience of like we often can't, all the knowing in the world, we can't force ourselves from being attracted to a kind of person. kind of available person,
Mhm.
right? Because we have this strong chemistry, this strong bond to hurt me, love me, hurt me, love me, hurt me, love me.
Mhm.
That goes all the way back often to these experiences in childhood. And so that's where it's like the knowing is amazing. Yes, of course. Read all you can, know all you can, but
Mhm.
then actually do the work of getting into your body.
Mhm.
And whether that's breath work or whether that's mantra or that's prayer work or that's dancing or moving it out, but it lives in the body. Like
Mhm.
bonding is about hormones, it's about chemistry,
Mhm.
it's about oxytocin.
Mhm.
It's like about like, and that stuff lives in, yes, produced by the brain, but yes, it goes into the body. And
Mhm.
that's where we have to bring the work.
Mhm. Mhm. And having to when they uh, whoever is feeling those emotions, it's hard to deal with the actual hurt of it or the
Mhm,
pain of it. And
mhm.
so what can you do to and we'll get into it. So I don't want to get too far ahead. Okay,
Yeah.
so trauma bonding can start as a child and it's hormone based. Okay, so I'm gonna
Mhm.
let you go ahead.
Yes, hormone based, or we can say chemistry driven. Um, it really has to have, in some way, shape, or form, from childhood or from maybe we find ourselves in an abusive relationship or a narcissistic relationship later on. There's some sort of pattern that gets established where you get hurt, and then that person that hurts you makes you feel so good in the aftermath of their hurt with their apology, with their making up for it. That what happens is like we hold out for those moments because that's where we feel seen, and that's where we feel connection with those that signed up to love us the most. And
Hmm.
that's why we stay in the dynamics. Is it's for the win.
Hmm.
And that feels like a win. It's not an actual win, but it gives the experience of a win.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And these, what I have been finding too is that these type of people really hold on to that hope more than anything in the world. No matter
Mhm,
how hurtful the situation is, no matter how bad the abuse can be, they hold on
mhm.
to this hope. Like
Yeah.
it's gonna be a rainbow. And one day,
Yeah.
this is gonna last for a long time. This is gonna last forever. But
Yeah.
how long do you subject yourself to that? I know a lot of times I get the few that I've taken on that have trauma, um, I get them to start looking at themselves and
Mhm,
try to get them to have a self-identification or self-identify the low self-esteem part of them,
mhm.
because that is that's what's keeping you in a lot of stuff, things that are hurtful to you, things that are not bringing you respect, things that are not bringing you happiness. You're staying there because you feel like that's all you deserve.
Yeah.
So let's
Yeah.
talk about that part of
Yeah.
you, so we can try to heal that part of you, and then hopefully we can move on. But yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, everything you say is spot on. There's this, we all have a tiny little younger version of ourself within us, a wounded child or this young part of us that is craving for some form of connection that we
Mhm.
didn't have in our childhoods, for one reason or another. And it's not to be dismissive of our parents or say they did a bad job. I mean, everybody tends to do the best they can with the
Mhm.
resources they have. And that's we just say that, okay, that's done. Now we don't, we're not blaming, we're just
Right.
stating truth, right?
Mhm.
And the truth is that each of us that have been raised in environments where there has been this trauma and chaos, we have trauma bonding within our relationships, and it's in our parenting, and it's in our coworker relationships, and it's in our partnerships, it's with our family members, and it's coming from this child, this unhealed aspect of ourself that is so desperately looking for the connection that never got brought at a young
Mhm.
age. And when we look at her, or this part of ourselves so compassionately, and we just say, oh, I mean, just imagine yourself as a young 5-year old waiting, waiting, waiting for that, mom to come home, and she doesn't come home, and you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting, and it's dark and you get scared, and there's no dinner. It's that feeling of like not knowing. feeling scared, feeling abandoned,
Mhm.
feeling um, rejected, feeling helpless,
Mhm.
right? And then she comes home and it's like, I'm so sorry, and it's this moment of relief, like, oh gosh, everything's okay. But there's no acknowledgement of, were you scared? Oh my gosh, you must have been so scared. I'm so sorry. Like that's the connection that we never got that keeps getting missed. And that's what we keep holding out for in these relationships in adulthood.
This is so good. I want to jump out. I'm sitting here. I'm like, I want to jump out my seat because, I do women's groups and things of that nature. But even I find myself, even when something comes to an end or something happens, I need the acknowledgement of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, if I don't get this acknowledgement, it does something to me, and I have to literally go into prayer because I'm like, Lord, I'm gonna go off if I don't get this acknowledgement. And I hear women even now. I just had a conversation with a dear friend of mine, and she's going through relationship issues, and she was saying if he could just acknowledge what he did, he never acknowledged what he did to me. He left me, he hurt me, and she's not getting it. And it's every time I talk, she's in tears, or she might have a good day, but then she's like, why won't he acknowledge what he did to me?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. How can we get over this? Because, where's this need for acknowledgement coming from?
It's coming from not having had it, because it's one thing to acknowledge what in your friend's circumstance he did, for him to acknowledge what he did. That's great. It ups the game big time when then he can acknowledge, and I understand it made you feel this way.
Hmm.
So that's the being seen part. So if we go back to this other example, if mom comes in the door and she's like, I'm so sorry I was late. There was a million things I had to do. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Okay, fine. But that didn't take care of the fact that, like, I was, as a 5-year-old, 6, 7, you're trembling inside. It's getting dark. I don't know where my mom is. This always happens.
Hmm.
There's no scooping up. There's no holding me tight. There's no saying, you must be so been so scared. I'm so sorry. Come here. Like, let me, put some essential oil on your
Hmm.
temples and rub your feet and cuddle you
Yeah.
and like, it's that it's yes, it's great to acknowledge what we've done, and to but then we need to also say, and I get that this is probably how you felt. Is that how you felt?
Hmm.
So it's like when in your example of leading workshops and stuff, it's like, it's amazing for that acknowledgement from participants, but then also ups the game to be like, that must have been really hard work. And how many hours did you put in? And how do
Hmm.
you even find the time for it? And you must be going crazy with everything. I cannot believe you pulled all of this off. It must have been almost impossible. Like, it's that
Hmm.
how you were feeling while it was happening
Hmm.
acknowledgement. That's like the gold.
Yeah. And and when you are acknowledged like that, somebody hears and sees you, it makes you feel more of a, I said for me, for because I deal with women, more of a woman, because
Mhm,
now somebody does see you and
mhm.
sees, what you've done, what you've put in, how something made you feel. And it's almost like you can see the thank you.
Yeah.
But what I have also seen too on the flip side is where, they voice what they feel, and then the other partner goes and says, "Well, I don't know why you felt like that. That
Mm.
just didn't make no sense.
Yeah.
Why would you feel like that? I don't, that's not how things like," and I'm like, oh my gosh, that doesn't do anything. And so again, just me, just the way I'm wired and the way that the Lord uses me, I always go back to, well, let's just deal with you. Because we cannot control other people. And I'm
It
sorry it makes you feel like that. I really, really am. But let's not take ourselves through that again, because once we know a person and who they are, we can't expect to go back to them and think that we're going to get a different response.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that leaves us with the choice, if we're an adult and we realize that we're in a trauma bonded experience with somebody. And I guess this is different, definitely different than if we're a parent and we need to work on our behavior towards our children. But
Mhm.
which that comes from a whole nother thing that we could talk about. But if you are currently in a partnership or in a situation where you're realizing that you are trauma bonded, and what I would say is the most helpful thing is to you have to summon the strength within yourself to give yourself what you're not getting from others.
Mhm.
And yes, it's a lonely job. It is a lonely job. But why we're hurting is and why we're in these dysfunctional relationships is because we keep hoping to get it from the other. And when we get to the point of just feeling so desperate and sad and angry that they won't, we have to crawl inside and we've got to be like, all right, well, as lonely and isolating and sad as it makes me feel, I got to be this to myself. So, what are you feeling in here today, Laurel? What didn't he say to you today? So, say it to yourself.
Mhm.
Recognize everything you did today, then sit down and write it out if you need to and be
Mhm.
like, damn, I am on top of it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That is really good. I think when I said that is really good, when you get to the part when you said the part of it can be a lonely place,
Mhm. Mhm.
and people don't like to be lonely,
Yeah.
but not realizing that sometimes that loneliness really can be a healing place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because what does it matter? I always think, what does it matter if what if everybody pats you on the back? What if people told you how great you are? But if you don't feel it within yourself,
Mhm.
every time you get to that low place in your life, you're going to look for other people
That's right.
to make you feel good. So why not get to the place where you can pat your own self on the back and say
That's
you
right.
did a good job. I don't care what nobody say. I did that, and I don't need it from nobody else. Because
Yeah.
sometimes people will like you today and not like you tomorrow, but you have to get to a place where you like yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the medicine, honestly. Um, and I think that it's not easy and it doesn't happen overnight, but that is truly, when you were talking about like that it's a lonely place, it's like it is a lonely place. And there's so much power in that moment of realizing that you have the inner core strength to be to notice yourself and love yourself and see yourself for all that you are. Like
Mhm.
there is so much power and strength in the capacity to do that for yourself. I do think that if women were able to do that, like it's such a quieter space too. We're not out there like, and you don't, and you should, and you never. And it's like, all right, it's quiet and it's calm. And from that place is such a strength that can come forward.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. Yeah, I think that is really, really beautiful. Um, so let us, so, okay, so let's talk about the different types of trauma bonds that people um, may find themselves in.
Okay. So definitely can happen in childhood. Yeah. There's the parent child, there's the relationship, the adult relationship. Um, and if I'm not answering the type correctly, just tell me. I think there it can be at the workplace. Um, and then I think there's this whole other component, which this would be this may take our conversation somewhere else, and maybe it's too long for today, but there's the whole narcissistic thing because trauma bonding conditioning is like intuitively exploited by narcissists.
Mhm, mhm.
They're masters at knowing how to play a trauma bonded person well. So that's a whole nother thing. I don't know if we want to go there today, but that is definitely a type of trauma bonding relationship that we could that we could find ourselves in.
Yeah, I would love for us to get into that because I think that's what we've been seeing a lot here lately. People didn't know what it was. They couldn't
Hmm.
understand what it was because I found myself in one and
Hmm.
thought, "What in the world?" It
Yeah.
was like this is something like
Yeah.
something is not right here, But yeah, I would love for us to dive into that and take an hour and really
Mhm.
talk about it because it needs to be
Yeah.
talked about.
It does because it's so, in conjunction with things like gaslighting and emotional abuse and manipulation, those things are designed to make us question our reality. And that
Hmm.
that is the major building blocks for how trauma bonding is formed. So if you, if you're, I'm just going to say this, like if you, one of your listeners doesn't feel like, oh, I'm not trauma bonded, like that doesn't relate to me, but you feel like you're in a relationship with a narcissist, get out, because the longer you're in that, you are literally forming neural pathways of trauma bonding
Mm.
via the routes of the gaslighting and the manipulation. So just get out, find a therapist, find a coach, find your person and end it. Because yeah, we don't have to have been abused in childhood to have a trauma bonding,
Mhm.
to become trauma bonded later in our lives.
We need to say that again. You don't have to have been abused as a child. You can actually go through this stuff as adults and
Yes.
not even realize what's going on. Oh my
That's
gosh. I mean, when I tell you I thought I was crazy, I was like, is it me? Is it me?
right.
So yes, yes. Because there are people who are literally that sit back and they watch.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
watch, they gain your trust. They can see that, especially if you're somebody like me, I'm a giver, I want to
Mhm.
care for you, want to make sure you're all right. Especially if you're taking care of me. And well, I think at that time thought you were taking care of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thought you was. Thought you had a good heart. But you have got to be careful because you will find yourself in a trap that if you don't have a solid people around you that are wanting to see and that will point it out
Mhm.
and say, girl, you have lost your mind. Do you not see, do you not see what is going on?
Yeah.
You will I mean, it's just hard to get out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then like you said, getting a grip on reality.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that's hard. I mean, the grip on reality is hard if we're still with the person.
Hmm.
So I think when you brought up boundaries, before or a bit earlier, we really do need those people out of our life to a degree to be able to work on this. I mean, I do, some couples work in my practice, and I do see some couples be able to stay together, but it's not easy. It's like all the really big hard ones, like getting over infidelity, or, it's like it's another really big hard one. And boundary is essential,
Hmm.
to the process of it.
Yeah. I want us to talk about couples that are married because I have
Mhm.
one um that not they're not I'm not seeing them. It's just a family member and they're married and the relationship is such a trauma bond.
Mhm.
And there was abandonment within it what that happened within the relationship.
Mhm.
And then there was because now you're married. So what do
Mhm.
you do with that? That's the sanctity of marriage. And then especially if that's your belief system. And then it's like, okay, maybe and then they come back, they give you a little glimpse of hope, but then they abandoned you again, you know.
Yeah. So what I would do with that, if I was working with them, or if people are listening and they relate, is you have to get really, you're never going to change him or her. You've got to completely work on yourself. And so unless they're willing, unless they recognize it and they're like, yeah, I really recognize this is unhealthy and I want to change too, then oh my God, amazing. Get a really good therapist and like go. But if that's not your situation, then you have to come back to yourself, and it's going to be uncomfortable, because it's like you've gone to the gym and you've always done squats in a certain way, and then you hire a personal trainer, and the personal trainer's like, that's not the right way to do squats. And they show you a different way, and you're really sore and it's really uncomfortable, and you have to tweak all the little micro adjustments to get the squat right. So it's going
Mhm,
to be uncomfortable, and there's a learning curve. So
mhm,
don't expect this to be easy, but it does start with you making micro adjustments within your marriage. So, and I'm just going to throw out an example. So if you are always the one that, makes dinner, um, and it's never appreciated, you may have to once a week be like, I'm going to hold the boundary. I don't make dinner tonight. And you don't need a why. There's no why. You
Mhm.
just say, on Wednesdays, I've just decided I need a night off from making dinner every night. And Wednesdays, I think, is the best night that I don't make dinner.
Mhm.
And come hell or high water, you hold that boundary. You don't slip back in there. So start really small with something to
Mhm.
test the waters, to make the micro changes of holding boundary within your relationship. It's going to feel hard and it's going to feel uncomfortable. It actually might even feel scary because of the backlash that you get from them. But
Mhm.
if you're really in a dynamic and the sanctity of marriage is really preserved within your dynamic, they're not going to leave you. They're not going to ask for a divorce.
Mhm.
So play with it, hold the boundary.
Yeah, yeah. And that backlash is what a lot of times they makes them convert back.
Exactly.
And it's like you're gonna have to, I
Hmm.
always like to say, put your big girl panties on
Yeah. Yeah.
and realize that this is for you, not for them.
Yeah.
This is for you,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
It's
Choose you.
That's right. Yeah. It's this I had to choose me even though he never could. I mean, that is just, or I had to choose me even though they never could. It's like, this is, that is it. That's it.
You about to make me start jumping all over the place. When you say I have to choose me because they never could. To when you say that, and for one, it should the person who's going through, if you're going through anything like that and you're having to choose yourself, for my heart breaks because as humans, we deserve to be chosen.
Yeah.
And when we're not, it's not an indication of we're bad, something's wrong with us. It's just that the way we view ourselves and how we treat ourselves is literally how we're teaching other people how to treat us. But
That's right.
when we don't choose our own self first, it gives other people permission not to. And it's hard to say it like that, but that is literally what we're doing. What we put out is what we get back. And if I
Yep.
put out, I lower myself for everybody. And there is a very unhealthy way of humility. There's a healthy humility. There is a toxic and non-healthy humility. You're not called to be a doormat.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's just not what it is. I love you. I want the best for you, but not at the expense of my own detriment. That I mean, because I love me. I love you like I love me. And I'm
Yep.
not gonna treat myself like that. So I'm not gonna let you treat me like that.
Yep. Yeah. That's right. That's right.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. This is real, and we'll probably stay on this for a little while because I think it can take us so many places that I know and I've seen so many
Hmm.
women deal with this.
Hmm.
Even when it
Hmm.
comes to, grown women that I have one personally that sits with me and cries all the time because she finds it so hard. She's doing it now, thank the Lord, but she's choosing herself now. But it's so hard because of the backlash.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's called names
Hmm.
because she says no.
Hmm.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, no, 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 no. Take them labels off, give them
Yep.
back to the senders. They're
Yep.
not yours. They're so used to you just caving in for everything.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Anytime people ignore your tears, that's an indicator that they don't really appreciate you. They don't honor you.
Yep. Yeah. Well, yeah, and they hold no space for your vulnerability, right?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So,
Yeah.
okay, so we had when you get into the place with a narcissist, it
Yeah.
makes it
Hmm.
easier for them because of all the other issues for them to see that this is the type of person you are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's right. So, okay, so the narcissist is keen to exploit and manipulate. And so they're not going to do that with strong, empowered, boundaried humans. They're going to seek out the ones that have, fear of setting boundary because of the backlash.
Mhm.
Uh, people pleasing tendencies because that ensures um, greater psychological safety, or so they think.
Mhm.
Um, and sort of this tendency to, I guess this goes with people pleasing, but there's a bit of a codependency, right? Like I'm dependent on you for
Mhm.
a way that I need to feel.
Mhm.
And I'm dependent on making you feel good or doing right by you. So the narcissist loves that. That is bait.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So when they see that, and those are aspects to a trauma bonded person that exist. Which again is like, it's I just hope that no listeners think that any ill thoughts towards themselves if they identify that they're trauma bonded. Like I have trauma bonded tendencies and come from like some trauma bonded relationships. It's easy, like we're sensitive. It's easy to have become that because in our childhoods we had to weather some really big storms, and maybe
Mhm.
we were responsible for a lot that we shouldn't have been. Like
Mhm.
all trauma bonded tendencies that a narcissist may prey on, so to speak, you developed those tendencies as a coping mechanism for some things in your life that were really, really challenging. And so
Mhm.
never to like get down on yourself, but to think like, wow, this is a world that wants to eat sensitive people up. Doesn't want to build them up, it wants to eat them up.
Mhm.
And that is the narcissist, like just hanging out, waiting for that sensitive human to be
Mhm.
like, okay.
Mhm.
So that's a bit of a tangent, but yeah, I wanted to just make sure that no listeners go in on themselves.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I'm writing a new book, and in the book, the young lady, she has trauma bonds, but her trauma bonds is coming from, and then she has I can never pronounce it correctly, parent, parent, with the child, the roles are reversed. Never
Mm.
can pronounce, excuse me. But her bonding comes from her parents, who are just, I mean, just a very toxic relationship,
Hmm.
and she's having to go in and take care of things that she shouldn't have to because mom can't. And then she
Yeah.
bonds with a young man that they grew up together, and he's in a toxic home environment as well. So they're bonding together over
Yeah.
this stuff that they're dealing with. But the young man is learning the negative traits of his home environment and got some tendencies to be manipulative, and
Yeah. Mm.
yeah, because he's
Yeah.
the savior, so he
Yeah.
becomes her savior.
Yeah. Yeah. The savior thing is yeah, that's a huge aspect of it too, right? The waiting to
Hmm.
feel saved, like we were talking about at the beginning, the waiting to win, the waiting to feel saved.
Hmm.
And again, the narcissist loves that feeling of power of like, oh, they're waiting for me to feel like I saved them, so I'll give them a bone here and there.
Hmm.
That is so powerful. That is just fuel for them,
Hmm.
for that personality. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So let's talk about the the cycle, or the cycle, the addiction of the cycle, if that makes sense. The addiction of
Hmm.
the cycle, which makes one leave, come back, leave, come back, leave, come back.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, it really stems back to this experience in childhood, essentially this sort of innocent experience of, oh wait, they do love me, okay, I am good enough, I am worthwhile, I am worth them taking me shopping, I am. And so the addictiveness is yeah, I mean, for the child I wouldn't call it addictiveness. As we get, it's just really purely dependent on, it's dependency for what every mammalian species needs, which is love and connection in early
Mm-hmm.
childhood.
Mm-hmm.
But then as adults, the the cycle of dependency is so much tied to, and I think for women, so much tied to this feeling of self-worth, so much tied to this feeling of they do love me.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe those aren't feelings, I guess it's an experience of self-worth, an experience of he does love me, an experience of um I am still, the the woman for him, like I'm still who he's choosing.
Mm-hmm.
And there is that's the cycle that we get dependent on is,
Mm-hmm.
please show me, tell me how much you love me. um and
Hmm.
I'll hold out for that.
Yeah.
It's because it feels good, right? I mean, to be told that we're loved and desired, like that's a dopamine hit. That is like
Hmm.
totally it's like a good cup of coffee. It's a
Hmm.
dopamine hit, and of course we want more of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen women who get out of it and then because they call them and tell them I miss you and like you
Mhm.
said, they give them all of that because they're in a and it's funny because it's like they're always right in the middle of their healing process where they're
Mhm.
starting to feel a little bit good about
Yeah,
themselves, but they might
yeah,
still be trying to figure out, well, I want a date, but I don't, I do. And
yeah,
then they might try and it's not a good experience or something, but they're still um in a single place, and then
yeah.
here
Mhm.
he comes,
Yep.
maybe, and I'm like, "Oh, no, run,
Mhm.
run, because
Mhm. Yeah.
he's not changed. Run, run, run."
Mhm.
But like you said, it hits that spot, and
Mhm.
it's right on time.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it does. And then, I think there's this other part to the dependency cycle that I want to name too, which is the beating ourselves up. We do a lot of beating ourselves up in that. And that I know it sounds strange that we would be dependent on that, but we do become dependent on that. Kind of like what you were talking about where, if that's the way that we're treated, if that's the way we're treating ourselves, then that is what we know and learn is how we should be treated. And so once they're not doing that anymore, we tend to do that. We go in on ourselves too. And
Mhm,
so to know that we're in a cycle, the cycle is, yes, partly dependent on them, but also partly dependent on how we also start to treat ourselves inwardly. So, when doing the work to break free, we do also have to break free from the patterns of personal self um, disrespect and the ways we're treating ourselves.
mhm.
I hope that makes sense.
No, it makes plenty of sense because if you're still struggling with having value for yourself, or
Hmm.
looking at
Yeah,
yourself as though you are good.
yeah,
You are good, you are good, you are good. And if you have to say it to yourself over and over, then do what you have to do. But you are. But if you're still struggling with that, you are gonna revert back to, okay,
yeah.
this is all I deserve. And really, that is so far from the truth.
Mhm. Yeah, but that's key, right? This is all I deserve. And that goes back to the Las Vegas slot machine example. Well, I won $1. It's like, yeah, but how much did you spend? And then it lowers our self-worth. Like
Hmm.
right then and there, it's like, well, I guess I lost 7 grand, but I won $1. And that will keep us in the cycle, dependent on, well, maybe I'll win more. But at what cost to the self?
Right, right. And what I found too is a lot of when you're with a narcissist, there is a lot of humiliation that goes on within that relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have done I mean, you done humiliated yourself before you will even get a slight,
Hmm.
okay,
Hmm.
and it's like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Exactly.
might well put a red nose on yourself because that is what this person is causing you to be like.
Mhm,
Um, and so yeah, and it does take a lot of work.
mhm.
It just does. I don't want nobody to think like, oh, well, I get out of it and we'll start doing the work
Mhm.
and it's gonna help because it's not. It's really it's not an overnight fix. And sometimes it takes years to even
Yeah.
get back to the place you need to get to.
Yeah, I mean, it could, and if you've gone through a lot of trauma as a child, it may just be a lifetime commitment. I know that for myself personally, I've just had to be like, well, this is what shows up for me in relationships. So I always have to have my kind of senses turned up on it. Like
Mhm,
I just have to be aware of my own tendency to fall into dynamics, whether that's a landlord or a friend or a
mhm,
family dynamic, right?
mhm,
It's like you just kind of have to turn the dial up on your senses, because increase your radar for your own patterns
mhm,
and watch yourself, because it's not just as simple as getting out of one relationship. We take those patterns with us. And
mhm,
then we have to really be watching ourselves for how we're re-engaging those patterns.
mhm.
Again, and this happens not by conscious choice. It happens because trauma bonding lives in the nervous system.
Mhm.
and your nervous system goes with you everywhere you go.
Mhm.
So,
Mm.
right? Yeah. Yeah.
I wish it was a something you could you some shot you could take, and you know, because I mean, because it does. It's almost like triggers, and it
Mhm.
goes off, and you can feel if you're aware, like you said, you can actually feel that stuff
Mhm.
going, and it's like ooh, and you're pulling against, like you're warned, almost like you're
Yeah.
warned, because I know, like you say, if you have a tendency to be over caring
Mhm.
because of whatever you went through, and this drives you, um that savior mentality.
Mhm.
Oh gosh, it's like, stop, you can't save the world, stop, stop. You're trying to, I have a someone I counseled, and I was like, you're trying to save the little girl.
Yeah.
You're trying to save her, but she's already saved. She's
Yeah.
saved and she's safe.
Yeah. That's right.
So when you see people that mirror her, you go
Mhm.
after, and it's like, it's not, it doesn't turn out good for you. It turns out good for them,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
doesn't turn out good for you. Now you're feeling like you're being used, and it's like, no, you have
Mhm.
got to stop moving off of that trigger, that thing that makes you move like that.
Yeah.
Stop and breathe
Yeah.
and realize.
Yeah. I think the closest thing to a shot is the breath. And so we need the knowledge, we need the knowing all of what we're doing. We need to identify our patterns. And then we need to slow the whole system down, our system, so that we're really aware. If we're angry at our kids and we're about to say something rude, it's going to feel really good to get that out. Yes, it is. I get it. But at the same time, like, your nervous system is so jacked up with cortisol and adrenaline in that moment, it's driving the situation you cannot see long term, right? So it's
Mhm,
coming back to the breath and being like, there is a moment that happens after this anger.
mhm,
Like, that's it. That is the shot right there. And
mhm,
if we could get really good at that before we send the text, before we send the email, before we do the anything,
mhm, mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Learning self-control
Mhm.
and disciplining yourself like that is, I think, one of the most. I think it's I would label it like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
master key,
absolutely.
because you
Yeah,
don't want to be controlled by other people
yeah.
and how whatever it is that they're doing. I know for me as a mother, my daughter was like, she would send me, and I would have to catch myself,
Yeah.
because she was the child that she probably represented 10 children in the house, because she was constantly doing something. And so going, let me go in my room. And then I did find myself sometimes not being
Mhm.
able to control myself.
Yeah.
And that's when you were talking earlier and saying that you say something, you go back, you have to apologize. I'm like, oh gosh, that was me.
It's it's a lot of us. I think it's all of us.
Oh gosh, but yeah, so I won't I want us to we got maybe 4 more minutes.
Okay.
So I wanted us to talk about just briefly the results of, once you're in it, you identified you're in it. Now you're getting out of it. You're
Mhm.
going through your process of healing. The effects of it, and this is my belief. I believe I read it somewhere too in a study, but trauma bonding, depending on how severe it is, can cause PTSD.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and that is because, um, well, it can cause PTSD. It can also cause complex PTSD, which is like kind of another level.
Hmm.
um, because the nervous system is never able to recalibrate. So PTSD is living with a continuous threat. And it's not the person or the thing. It's how we are sort of rearranged as a result of the trauma. That's really what the PTSD is. So if I get in a car accident and I am shaky for months after that car accident, it wasn't It wasn't necessarily the car accident, because somebody else could have been in the same car accident and not been shaky for months in the car after. So it's how I was rearranged within my being. It's how I changed within my being as a result of that traumatic um, person or situation.
Hmm.
And I
So it
think that,
causes
yeah.
so it causes sometimes people not to want to get back into relationships, even though they might have
Mhm.
a desire for it,
Yeah.
but they get halfway or they start trying to get the relationship might move close, but then they break it off
Yeah.
because this reaction within their body.
Yeah, or they go right. So the PTSD, yes, it's like, well, I have PTSD in relationship. I have PTSD with the way he speaks, or the PTSD with the, that nonverbal, the way he stands, or whatever it is, PTSD with the loudness of his voice. It's your nervous system is preparing preparing you for a threat.
Hmm.
And then because something happened at some point in time that really was a threat, and it rearranged you inside as a result. And so now you don't show up the same way in relationship. You may show up reserved. You may show up angry. You may show up punitive. You may show up abusive. You may sabotage every relationship. You may run from every relationship. You may just swear them off altogether. So what that's doing, though, all of that is shrinking the human being away from the fullest expression of themselves. That is the devastating effects of PTSD and trauma, is it shrinks us away from our fullest potential. Um, and that's, if we're doing that in relationship or just forgetting relationship altogether, that's an example of that shrinking away, that pulling away, that not being the fullest expression of who we are.
Wow, wow. Well, I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Thank you. Me too.
I love it. Look, I wish we had I could stay on here for hours because I'm like, this is really good. Because, when you think about some of the things that I get in my inbox and then just, talking with people, and I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, this is really running rampant like a like everybody's drinking the same water or something,
Yeah.
and but yes, I want us next time to, kind of dive into now. I think I'm gonna bring some more examples of things that I'm hearing,
Okay.
you
I
know.
would love that. I think that, yeah, and to any of your viewers that have specific questions, I think that's just such a cool way to go about working through some of these buzz things, narcissism, trauma bonding, PTSD, complex
Mhm.
PTSD, is actually bring your questions.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of them would something was going on with my email, but we'll talk about that. Something was going on with my email. So anyway, so thank you everybody for joining us. Laura, thank you. It is
Thank
always a
you.
pleasure. You
Thank you.
are like a well of knowledge. I love talking to you. I mean, because you break it down and we don't have to worry. Look, me and the viewers, we don't like these long, complex words. We're like, we simple. We're simple over here. Give it to us in layman's terms. So we thank you. We appreciate you. And so don't forget, guys, if you have questions, email, email, email. If you're watching this and we didn't get to something that you said today, we will most definitely get to it next month. And we are excited. So don't forget that will be on here once a month with talking about relationship issues, but I think we're going to stay on trauma bonding for a little while because I want us to really get it and get it and get it and get it so that we can live well. So until next time, remember, I love you. And as always, I am praying for you.
Oh, it's just like the sun coming up in an early morning breeze. It's just like the waves of the water coming in from the sea. It's like a refreshing shower at the beginning of spring. Oh, you are so beautiful to me. Oh, you are so beautiful to me. Well, it's just like the snow It's like the changing of the leaves on the trees when autumn begins. Just like water from a mountain that creates a beautiful stream. You are, oh, so beautiful to me. Oh, you are, yeah, beautiful to me. Now it is what I see, but it's also what's inside. It's the way that you love and the way you smile. It is your heartbeat for all the world to see. You're so beautiful to me. Ooh, you are so beautiful to me. It's like finding a light with darkness around. It's just like finding a voice when there is no sound. It's just like winning it all when it looks like defeat. You are so beautiful, beautiful to me. I'm just saying, you are so beautiful, beautiful to me. It is what I see, but it's also what's inside. It's the way that you love and the way you smile. It is your heartbeat for all the world to see. You're so beautiful to me. Now when God started speaking, the lights and the trees, it was the Omega in Him that saw your destiny. And when He saw your